Okay, so here we are going to be learning about painting. So liquid tempera. Liquid tempera is created by mixing color with eggs, gum, or glue-like material. So this is the typical paint that you think of when you think of the art studio and painting. Okay, so liquid tempera facts. They are bright and they're not very see-through. You can see through them a little bit. They are non-toxic, which means they are safe. They're not toxic to us, and they are washable. So if you get this on your hands or your clothes, you're pretty much okay. When you use tempera paint, you want to use thick paper, and it dries pretty fast, and you can layer on top of it. Use a big brush when covering large amounts of space, and a small brush for little fine details. All right, you can mix paint. And you can use this on cardboard, paper mache, wood, and obviously paper. You must rinse your brush before you switch colors, and you need to have a paint palette of some sort. So, the options that I use as a paint palette is either a piece of paper, because we have a lot of extra old paper in the art room, so I like to reuse something so it doesn't go to waste. Or if you're doing a rather bigger project where you need a lot more colors, you can use a paint palette. And I want you to notice here on my paint palette, I don't have the paint filled up all the way to the top of my circle because I know I'm not going to paint a lot. I don't need a lot. So you want to think about not being wasteful when you pour your paint. Okay, so basically, let me show you some brush techniques real quick. And I'm just going to do this on my paint palette here. I have something called a flat brush and a round brush. Okay, a round brush gives me marks like this. A flat brush gives me marks like this. So obviously, if I need to fill up a whole lot of space, I'm going to want to use a bigger brush. So round just means it's rounded at the top, like this. Flat means it's flat at the top, like this. Flat. Okay, so we are going to continue our knowledge here of liquid tempera paint. So these are the techniques we should know by now. Just painting flat, using a brush correctly. We can outline our shapes with a smaller brush, and we can blend colors together by softly making the colors change into one another. So next so textures, that's to create the way something might feel or look like it's feeling. So I would use a smaller brush to create these little textures. So this would be good like sprinkles on a donut or a piece of cake. This would be good for like brick on a wall. That you are creating. So I can make lines. And I'm doing this just with the tippy toe on my brush. I'm not putting the whole brush down, so I'm getting these nice skinny lines. You can make waves. Alright, so that is how you would create textures using tempera paint and a round brush, a small round brush. Okay, so streaking, that's very similar to what I just did here on the textures panel. Streaking is when you will make all of your lines go in the same direction and it looks like a streak of something across the sky. This would be good for like a shooting star maybe. And you can put different colors in there. Creates a lot of energy. Maybe if you're drawing someone running. This always reminds me of something I would see in like a comic book. This would be good for maybe rain or wind. Alright, dabbing. Dabbing is where you will simply make marks by dabbing your paintbrush. streaking, you can add in colors to this. And this might be good, maybe if you want to draw like a tree or paint a tree. This might be good to show leaves. This was kind of another way to show texture, or you can do your whole painting in this technique and just give it a really stylized effect. Okay, so the next painting technique is scumbling. So scumbling, I'm using this kind of brush. It actually reminds me of like a broom. And so it has really hard bristles. And so I'm going to take a little bit of a color. And scumbling is kind of like a rough movement of the paint. So I'm kind of dabbing and swirling at the same time. And you can tell it's really adding a lot of texture here. So this would be good for like maybe waves crashing on an ocean. Could be good for maybe clouds or tree maybe. Okay. So it's kind of a rough movement of the paint. And I'm going to take a little bit of white, and you can tell I can blend colors with this technique. This is one of my most favorite techniques to use because I just like the effect that it gives. It looks really soft, really good for like landscapes or seascapes. Okay, so that is scumbling. So you're going to need this kind of brush. When you're done with it, you do need to rinse it out. All right, now layering. So layering is just going to be kind of very similar combination of what we've already done here. So I'm going to take a little bit of paint, and I can build up depth by adding paint on top. So I'm not necessarily mixing, I'm layering. So I'll take a little bit of yellow and put some on top. Take a little bit of red. So I don't want to mix or layer too many colors together because then it'll just start to turn to gray. When you mix too many colors, it just becomes gray. But you can see that's 3 colors all being layered in different orders on top of each other. This creates, again, good for textures, good for trees, good for bushes, good for effect. And the very last technique is Sgraffito. Sgraffito means to scratch. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to paint flat color, and you could do more than one color. I'm just going to do one color for this example. You want to wait for that to dry, so I need to wait a little bit before I show you the next part. But Sgraffito means to scratch through, so we'll scratch through this paint to reveal what's underneath. Okay, so while the paint is wet, you can get one of these tools back at the painting station and you can scratch through the wet paint. Now the paint has to be wet, otherwise it won't work. So I lay this down and I pull or drag across, and that creates a scratching through. You could do this with like an old pen too, or an old pencil, and scratch through. But all of this has to be done while the paint is wet. And that is called Sgraffito, scratching. So there are all of the techniques that we can do using Tempera Paint. There's a lot more you can discover on your own, I'm sure, but these are the ones that I've decided to stick to for our art studio. Just remember always to rinse your brush before you switch colors, and use a sponge to dab off any extra water that is on your brush to keep your brush dry. You don't need a wet brush really to do tempera paint. So here are our techniques that we should know.